Well, welcome to this online panel hosted by CGTN Think Tank and the Macau University of Science and Technology. I'm Michael Wong here in Beijing. So with COVID-19 infecting over now some 6 million people around the world, our discussion today focuses on the role of using traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM for short, in combating the coronavirus and how traditional Chinese medicine can better integrate or complement modern medicine. And we'll also discuss what criteria we should use to evaluate the effectiveness of TCM and how to really unleash the potential of TCM when it comes to treating diseases. We've got six fantastic experts from all around the world to talk about this topic today. Viewers can also participate by joining us on our social media platforms on YouTube, Weibo, or CGTN homepage. Our six panelists will each give their own presentations first, and then we're going to open it up to questions among the panelists and to our online audience as well. So joining us today are Professor Liu Liang, President at the Macau University of Science and Technology and an academician at the Chinese Academy of Engineering. In Germany, we have Professor Thomas Efferth, the chair of the Department of Pharmaceutical Biology of the Institute of Pharmacy and Biochemistry at Johannes Gutenberg University. We've got Dr. Li Guangxi, director of the Pulmonary Division at Guangxi Hospital and a member of the China Academy of Chinese Medical Sciences. Professor Emilio Clementi, head of the unit of clinical pharmacology at the Fate Bene Fratelli Sacco Hospital of the University of Milano, joins us from Italy. We've got Elaine Leung, assistant director of the State Key Laboratory of Quality Research in Chinese Medicines and an associate professor at the Macau University of Science and Technology. And also joining us from Italy, we've got Sergio Bengrazzi, a member of the World Federation of Acupuncture and Moxibustion Society. So welcome to you all. Professor Liu.
Yes.
Let me start with you and get your thoughts on traditional Chinese medicine.
Good. Thank you. May I share my PPTs?
Yes, let's start now.
So, good morning and good afternoon, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very much pleased to share some experiences and information of Chinese medicine on the global stage regarding their therapeutic efficacy and the mechanism ratio. The title of my presentation is Chinese medicine in fighting COVID-19. So COVID-19 is a new disease caused by new virus of SARS-CoV-2, while there are no specific drugs to treat the disease. This is really a big challenge to the mankind. How can we find the virus and help our patients? Chinese Vice Premier Sun Quan'an, who was leading a central government team to guide the epidemic control, she underscored the use of TCM. She said, we tried to do the research to establish application and quality assurance system with whole coverage and anti-process of Chinese medicine to treat COVID-19 patients, and also to support combined therapy of Chinese medicine and Western medicine. Why does Chinese medicine is used? I think this is because of historically in fighting virus and pestilences in China. Just in year 2003, solid and clinical experiences of Chinese medicine for treating SARS patients. This is, for example, just several years ago. So, and another, Chinese medical doctor are often to prescribe a Chinese herbal formula to treat the patients, in which there must be virus and bioactive components contained in the formula to take a comprehensive therapeutic effect. So, Chinese herbal medicine to treat COVID-19 patients, it might be not only acting on the virus, but also on various pathological molecules of the disease, like suppression of a cytokine storm and boosting of immune system of the body. In the past 3 months, I'm very much delighted to know there are 34 papers published in SCI journals on fighting COVID-19 by Chinese medicine, like the journals of pharmacological research, phytomedicine, and also pharmacology. This is a scientific paper and published. Based on the published work, Chinese medicine against the COVID-19 may involve in multiple molecular mechanisms, like inhibition on the virus, binding to ACE2 receptor to block virus invasion, and the suppression on the pro-inflammatory cytokines protection and boosting immune system, and the amelioration of the area inflammatory cell recruitment, and so on. So in China, the National Administration of Traditional Chinese Medicine of China recommended 3 patent Chinese medicine drugs and 3 Chinese medicinal formulas to treat COVID-19 patients. The 3 patent drugs are Liu Liang Qingwen capsule, Jinhua Qinggan granular, and Xue Bijing injection, while 3 herbal formula are Qinghui Paidu decoction and the Xuanhui Paidu decoction, and another is a Huasi Baidu decoction. If you have an interest to know them in details, and all compositions of those treatment of COVID-19, try 7 edition. So now I would like to show you some examples of clinical and experimental studies. The first one is an in vitro study. The Liu Liang Qingwen capsule, and from this experiment, we can say that Liu Liang Qingwen capsule can significantly inhibit virus replication. Further, by analyzing the changes of virus quantity and morphology detected by the transmission electron microscope, it was found that Liu Liang Qingwen capsule significantly increased the cell resistance to the novel coronavirus. In this slide, we can say that Liu Liang Qingwen capsule suppresses the expression level of pro-inflammatory cytokines, particularly on interleukin-6. In short, IL-6. IL-6 is the most critical cytokines in the cytokine storm of COVID-19 patients, particularly in the severe and critical ill cases. And the IL-6 antibody, in fact, has been used to treat severe and critical ill patients as well. Here, it is a pioneer RCT studies performed by Professor Nanshan Zhong's team on the assessments of Liu Liang Qingwen capsule in treating COVID-19 patients. A total of 284 patients were divided into treatment group and control group. As a result, we can say that the overall recovery rate and the improvement of the chest CT manifestations in the treatment group demonstrate significantly higher than that of the patients in the control group, but no significant difference in the conversion rate from mild to severe cases between 2 groups. So the research team made a conclusion that Liu Liang Qingwen capsule is effective for treating mild cases of the COVID-19 patients. This, in fact, this article has been already published in the Journal of Phytomedicine. And my own research teams, we conducted a comprehensive analysis on all of the clinically effective formulas that are included in the national guidelines, provincial recommendations, and registered and clinical trials. The results show that a total of 167 Chinese herbal formulas with 255 differentiated herbs were in use for treating COVID-19 patients. Based on this deeply analyzed data, we found a new formula for the study. We called this formula as a modified machine scan decoction. In this decoction contained 10 medicinal herbs here. So we use a method of the protein-protein interaction analysis to predict and the potential therapeutic and the targets of the modified machine scan decoction. And very, very interesting, the results show that the critical therapeutic targets of the modified machine scan decoction is interleukin 6. Just as I mentioned before, interleukin 6 is the most and the critical and the cytokines in the cytokine storm of the COVID-19 patients, particularly in the severe and the critical ill cases. Finally, I want to also show you another therapeutic mechanism may involve in the improvement of the pulmonary fibrosis. By using bleomycin-induced pulmonary fibrosis model in mice, we found some chemicals derived from Chinese herbal medicine could block the formation of the pulmonary fibrosis by downregulation of the expression of the pro-inflammatory cytokines, such as interleukin 17 and the interferon gamma in the lung tissues. And then in summary, how does the Chinese medicine go to effects in fighting COVID-19? So I think the first is a suppression of virus replication and the blocking and the virus invasion and relieving symptoms of the patients and inhibiting cytokine storm like particularly interleukin 6 and improving the chest CT manifestations and preventing the transition from the mild to severe, downregulating interleukin 17 and the interferon gamma to block and the formation of the pulmonary fibrosis. This is we can see that because Chinese medicine contain the not only one herb, so it's quite often to prescribe the several medicinal herbs to form a formula, as I said. Must be multiple components in the formula then to take effects by multiple active components and acting on the multiple targets and pathways and so on. This is my presentation, and thank you very much for all.
All right, thanks for that, Professor Liu. I think my biggest takeaway from your presentation was that traditional Chinese medicine can indeed play a significant role in terms of preventing the transition of COVID-19 from mild to severe cases. All right, thanks for that presentation, Professor Liu. Professor Efferth, let's get to you in Germany.
Okay. Okay, I guess you can see my slide screen right now. So my name is Thomas Efferth, and it is a pleasure for me to have this opportunity today to participate in this thriving conference. Let me first give you some background on myself. Me as a Western scientist might be a little bit uncommon to be involved in Chinese medicine, but I can truly say that I'm now involved for 25 years in research and traditional medicine. I'm a biologist by training, and I came into molecular pharmacology in the late 1980s, and a little bit after that already I recognized that traditional Chinese medicine has a lot to offer, not only to China but to the world, and the integration of Western and Eastern medicine is certainly something which is very promising for the future. So my interest to combine molecular pharmacology and traditional Chinese medicine is mainly related to cancer. I'm interested in resistance mechanism, drug repurposing, and during the past years also network pharmacology and bioinformatics, as I will show you in a few minutes. I'm very proud to say that my efforts in Chinese medicine have been recognized also in China nationwide by conferring the Qiwang International Award to me 3 years ago. And this is just a sign of the tight collaboration and also friendship between my department and diverse groups in China, and most importantly also the group of Professor Liu Liang in Hangzhou. So let me just give you one example why I am interested in Chinese medicine. And this is a plant probably you all know. This is Artemisia annua Qinghao and his main compound Qinghao-Zu. It is well known as an anti-malarial drug. You all know that Tu Youyou has been conferred the Nobel Award in 2015. And we have been working since 1995, not on malaria, but on cancer. And it turned out that this compound is also very active against cancer, not only in vitro in cell lines, but also in vivo. We have done a lot of molecular mechanistic investigations on that. We isolated artemisinin from the compound and different other compounds also in the plant. We have performed network pharmacology, did a lot of work on the molecular mechanisms. We identified the molecular targets by approaching bioinformatics techniques, and we were fortunate to collaborate with partners from the University of London and also from other clinics worldwide, that artemisinin and artesunate are indeed active, not only under experimental conditions, but also in the patient. We have performed several clinical phase 1-2 trials showing that there is a survival advantage for those people who take artesunate compared to placebo. Shown here is just one sketch of a phase 2 randomized clinical double-blind trial performed in colon cancers. So let me come to the main topic today, and this is COVID. Maybe just one more figure here on the achievements we have obtained with Chinese medicine during the past years. We were fortunate with our team in Mainz, and also before I came to Mainz at the German Cancer Research Center in Heidelberg, we were fortunate to publish an entire panel of different top-notch papers. Quite recently, just a few days ago, we published a paper in Lancet Respiratory Medicine on COVID. I will come back in a minute on that paper. And out of the more than 600 papers we published so far, 200 papers were related to Chinese medicine and around 90 papers on artesunate, so the project I just mentioned before. So let me come to the main topic today. This is COVID. In the middle of January, we made the decision that this is certainly not a short crisis. This could be a long crisis, and it is important to step into this field. And what we did here is that we just took our established technologies for cancer now in the context of COVID. And this was most easy with our virtual drug screening technology. This was established for around 6-7 years in our laboratory, and we just exchanged the target molecules for cancer by target molecules of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And within 3 months, we were able to publish 2 top-notch papers. One was pre-printed in the bulletin of the WHO. This is a paper where we looked for compounds which might specifically target the virus. And the other paper, as I mentioned, just published in Lancet Respiratory Medicine a few days ago, is about a in vitro technique using organoids, lung cell organoids, to test the activity of drug candidates from Chinese medicine or any other compound worldwide, to see whether we could bring forward novel drug candidates closer to the clinic. So what did we do with our drug screening? We have the fortunate situation that the largest university supercomputer in Germany is located at the University of Mainz. And this is a big advantage, and we took advantage by that fact that we are performing virtual drug screening. Here, in the case of COVID, we performed a drug screening of 42,000 compounds. 3 chemical libraries were used, one with FDA-approved drugs which are already on the market, which are in the clinic for diverse other diseases, and we tested whether the one or the other of these compounds might also be active against COVID. The second was a natural product database with compounds directly isolated from medicinal plants, including those from traditional Chinese medicine. And the third library were experimental compounds. They were consisting also of natural compounds, but also of semi-synthetic derivatives of natural compounds. And what we did now is we screened these compounds to find candidates which might be interesting for the treatment. We came from 42,000 compounds to 300 candidates. These 300 candidates, which have been subjected to molecular docking, were then in parallel tested by an algorithm taken from artificial intelligence for drug likeliness. So what does it mean? If you have a compound which might nicely inhibit one of the proteins of SARS-CoV-2, this does not necessarily mean that this is a compound which can be used as a drug. If you are, for instance, if you have a drug which is not soluble in water, you cannot take it as a drug. You cannot further develop it. So we looked for 20 chemical and physical properties which are necessary to make a compound a drug. And this was done by an algorithm looking for compounds among these 300 which are maybe able to be used as a drug as well. And then we came up with 3 top 10 lists from each of the 3 chemical libraries. And this is shown here more in detail what we did. We have chosen 3 target proteins from the virus out of the 10 which are known to be coded by the virus. And we have specifically selected those mechanisms which are different from each other. So the strategy here was that we selected 3 different mechanisms to have a better chance if one mechanism would not work out, that we still have 2 other possibilities. So we took one from the surface of the virus. This is the spike protein. The second one is a unit which is used to build the nucleocapsid of the protein of the virus. And the third one, which is necessary to process the RNA of the virus. This is the methyltransferase. And what we did now here is that we have used the 3-dimensional structures of these proteins, and we have docked these 42,000 compounds to these 3 proteins. And this has not only been done once per compound, so we repeated these calculations for binding 750,000 times for each protein and for each compound. So you can imagine this is a huge amount of calculations. This can only be done by a supercomputer as we have it in Mainz. We had a total number of calculations which was over 31 billion calculations. And what we did here is that we screened the surfaces of these proteins to find out areas where these compounds were docking with high affinity, assuming that those areas where the compounds bind might be those which are interesting to inhibit the virus replication. And we came up at the end with a, let's say, a hit parade, a top list of compounds. Here are the front runners of compounds we have identified from the 3 libraries. On the left side, you see 4 examples from the FDA-approved drugs. So this is part of the drug repurposing approach we have performed. And it was quite interesting to see that among the top 10 compounds, 4 compounds were already approved drugs to treat another virus, the hepatitis C virus. So this is interesting because SARS-CoV-2 is a single-stranded RNA virus, which is quite comparable to the hepatitis C virus. So we have quite a good reason to assume that these hepatitis C virus drugs will also be active against SARS-CoV-2. And this news has now been spread, I can say, pretty much worldwide, all over the world. We have around 100 press releases from USA to Canada to South America, all over Europe, also Eastern Europe, also in China, also in India, everywhere, also Australia. This has been at the American CBS broadcasting channel. So this is something really we want to follow right now to see whether we have drugs in hand which can be used to treat right away, because these are approved drugs. On the second line, you see the top candidate from our natural product library. And this is quite interesting because this compound we have found here is called lodiflavone, which is a constituent of a Chinese drug which is used in Chinese medicine. This plant is called Lonicera japonica. This is the Asian honeysuckle, well known in Chinese medicine. And so we have clear indications that the medicinal plants which are used in Chinese medicine are also very valuable to be used for the treatment of COVID. And on the right side, you see one example of a compound we have identified from our experimental compounds. This is a chemical compound which is not part of a medicinal plant and not part of already approved drugs. This is just for the future drug development approach we have in our laboratory. So at this point, I would like to stop. I gave you a short overview of what we did so far, and I think we have a lot which can be used for further projects together with our Chinese friends. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that, Professor Efferth, for introducing us to your findings on SARS-CoV-2 and also mentioning that Chinese medicinal plants are indeed useful in treating COVID-19 and that TCM ingredients are active, can be active against cancer cells as well. So thank you for that presentation. Dr. Li, over to you now.
Yes, thank you for asking to join this fantastic discussion. So my topic today is on the, I'm a clinician, so most time I'm doing the clinical studies. So I want to introduce how we do the prevent acute lung injury with Chinese medicine. So I want to start from a case. So this is the actual case from Wuhan. So he is male and 52 years old, baseline diabetes and OSAS. He was on moxifloxacin for IV injection for about 8 days and using steroids for another steroids for at the same time for 8 days, and the fever increased from 37.8 to 39.5 Celsius, and he had coughing, shortness of breath, and you can see from the physical examination, you can see he is on the FiO2 on 65, and his saturation is only 81%. So obviously he is on the a very severe stage, and it's actually he is developing the according to the standard is on the ARDS stage. So and after treatment, you can see he's after using Chinese medicine, his improvement, the saturation increased to 97% on the 43 FiO2. So obviously he is recovering. And on the discharge, you can see the CT scan on discharge. So we don't do the CT scan during the severe stage because it's we cannot move the patients, and you can see the from the CT scan, and his lung is really bilateral infiltrate in both sides. And 1 month after discharge, and his lung, you can see the lower part, and he did recover quite a lot from the COVID-19. So from this case, what we use, I will discuss later. But in history, Chinese medicine had did a lot. The already mentioned in the Shanghai Lun, the Qing dynasty, Song dynasty, we had a lot of pandemics in the Chinese medicine history. We did a lot of success with Chinese medicine treatment. So the pandemic is totally different from the seasonal influenza, because the people really have little immunity against the new virus. So it's bigger than the seasonal influenza. You can see the difference between the seasonal influenza and the pandemic influenza. It's quite, and also, as you know, from the till now, so actually the coronavirus is changing, and this new virus want to find a new host. Maybe the human is his target. So what we have licensed is the clinical work. Without vaccination is really far, and we still need to reduce the speed of transmission and mortality rate. So the symptoms of COVID-19 usually is a fever, fatigue, coughing, everyone knows, and maybe some other people may have different complications. Most of cases, they are quite mild, and about 85% they really just like an influenza. But the 15% patients, they do have a very severe, the complications. What's the vulnerable population? That's a male, overweight, and diabetes, and other comorbidity. That's from our database. We analyze about 10 previous data. We show that. So here is so BMI. If the patient had overweight, he had a high chance to develop acute lung injury. So from the time series clinical presentation, we can see that during the incubation period is about 10 to 14 days a week, and the fever period is a golden window to prevent acute lung injury. That's the first week fever. So that's very important, treating window. So if you can stop fever within a week, and the patients will not develop acute lung injury, and otherwise, some vulnerable population will start to have the lung injury. Then this is usually caused by the delayed treatment of prolonged fever. And after that, the patient will fall into the recovering, period. So the most important part, the three indications, indicates the patients will have the severe acute lung injury, the high temperature, and cough and dyspnea. So how Chinese medicine really works, we want to do something very early and stop the patient going to ICU. So during the very early stage, what we need to do is control transmission, test, and to control the mild population. And in the fever window, that's the most important part. We want to right now we don't have any confirmed antiviral drug and antibiotics really work on those patients. Steroids, NSAIDs medicine, like a paracetamol in the Europe, this all did not work. So how we to stop the fever, stop the inflammation, that may be the best way to control that is Chinese medicine. So what we use for patient, actually what we use ginseng detoxify that formula. So we can do. So that's really you can see the components of this formula. So we want to make a patient sweating using some ginseng plus some Chinese herbs to make patients sweating and reduce the fever. So that's what we thought. Maybe if we can use some paracetamol, or combined with the ginseng, so maybe that also works. But this is a very nice paper published in the heart and lung transplantation. So you can see that during the first week, actually, the early infection virus response is very high, but later on, the hospital responses, so basically the cytokine storm kill our lung. So the key role of genes, the mechanisms, we found that it's a basic function is anti-inflammatory functions, and so we thought the key mechanism is do the immunoregulation. So we'll try this medicine in different countries, and it really works. We succeed in quite a lot of cases in different countries. So the history of Ren Baidu is quite long, and actually it's recorded in the Song Dynasty, and later on in Qing Dynasty, we saw it's a very, very effective formula against the so this is not what we created right now. So it's a long history in the Chinese medicine. Well, another paper, very interestingly, the recently published this in German, I think in Italy, they also published some paper. They noticed that this new pandemic, COVID-19, really killed quite a lot of male gender patients. So we thought it may be relevant to the low testosterone levels, and this can worsen our inflammatory and can our cytokine storm. So how to have COVID-19 patients? So that's how the basic mechanism is acute lung injury. You can see this from medicine. So the left part is normal alveolar, but the right part is injured alveolar. So this the injured alveolar caused by the direct and indirect virus. So the injury by the virus, and another is a cytokine triggered by the virus. So how we did that? We use the ginseng formula. We make the patient fever gone, and later on we use some kind of transdermal therapy to stop the cough. So basically, for the TCM practitioners, I thought maybe we can use the ginseng to protect the vulnerable population, and use the transdermal therapy to kill the cough, to stop cough. So basically, we tried several years research. We did notice that using the transdermal therapy, we can treat quite a lot of patients with PAP. So it's a pulmonary alveolar stenosis. So you can see the infiltrate is gone after 1 year. Transdermal therapy continuously. So what is the clinically how we treat the COVID-19 patients? First one, we identify high-risk population and provide the treatment, and the early use of ginseng protect the vulnerable population. And after the injured alveolar backup for critically ill patients. Thank you. Thank you. That's here.
Dr. Lee, it seems like we're having some audio issues with me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. But maybe it is not stable.
Yeah, maybe the signal's not stable, but let's try and work through it. Let's continue your summary, and then we'll see where we go from there.
You did anything for my summary?
I'm sorry, Dr. Lee, I couldn't hear you properly. I think it's still an audio issue that we need to work through.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
Now I think you're back. Now you're back. Just continue where you left off.
The last slide you want me to talk.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think the last slide is a summary slide, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Let's start again from there.
Yes. So the summary for the treatment of COVID-19, the first one is we need to identify high risk, protect them, and prevent the development of acute lung injury. And second, to use the ginseng to protect the vulnerable population, especially some qi deficiency. Actually, those patients, they are most vulnerable population because of most patients they only for very mild, symptoms. And after that, we use transdermal therapy to cure injured alveolar. Certainly, we need intubation backup for critically ill patients. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Lee, are you in Saudi Arabia right now? And if so, could you let our audience know what you're working on in Saudi Arabia and why you're there?
Yeah, it's some kind of that we need to treat some we need help some Chinese patient here. That's all.
Oh, okay, great. So thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for that presentation. I especially enjoyed your case study detailing how using traditional Chinese medicine, a patient who was in the severe stages of COVID-19, a fever of, wow, 39.5 degrees centigrade, getting better and recovering after taking TCM. And also, I think you mentioned a very valid point in terms of using TCM before a vaccine is developed could be quite a good mechanism to combat the coronavirus. Okay, so thank you so much for that. Professor Clementi, let's get to you now.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes, hopefully.
Yep, loud and clear.
Because also here the connection is not particularly good. I've lost it twice, but hope it lasts at least until I finish the talk. Now let's share the screen. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so probably I am the only one here who is not working on traditional Chinese medicine directly, but I have started to understand and to follow traditional Chinese medicine since we started a program 5 years ago with the journal I am editor-in-chief of pharmacological research, which was to try to help traditional Chinese medicine towards a Western perspective. So my talk will be seen from the viewpoint of an editor of a journal that has never worked on TCM but has experience, although indirectly, about TCM. And before I start getting into the point, I just want to make a brief statement about what traditional Chinese medicine is, let's say, seen from the Western perspective. Now, up until the middle of the 19th century, therapy in the Western countries was essentially based on the use of herbs. And there are two important aspects of this kind of therapy. It was standardized and it was under the control of the local government, such that every single preparation of this kind of herbs, it was called theriaca, and it was containing 72 herbs, was made publicly, and the amphores were sealed before being sent to the drugstores. And the tradition has been maintained somehow, even in the present days, for sure in Italy, but also in Germany and France, we have what we call the Fernet, which is a liquor made of, it's a simplified formula of theriaca. And my grandma was always saying, take a sip of it and it will be good for your health. So there is in the Western mind a positive attitude towards a kind of treatment which is, in terms of cultural framework, different from traditional Chinese medicine, but can be useful at the moment we want to bring traditional Chinese medicine and its value toward a Western audience. Now, from my perspective, I have seen several papers coming on traditional Chinese medicine, and well, Professor Liu has already, and Professor Efferth have already explained well the role of this medicine into the current pandemic, but and I agree upon that, especially when traditional Chinese medicine is combined with conventional Western medicine. And I just bring here two examples, one from a previous pandemic, the one from the first coronavirus of SARS, and the second one we published recently on the current epidemic. So the combination appears to be very effective. And that is for sure something people are starting to recognize across the world. Now, what are the main problems of traditional Chinese medicine towards the West? And I hope by this to answer also a couple of questions I've seen coming in from the audience. Now, the first important issue is an aspect of pharmacodynamic and pharmacogenetics. Population across the world differ for several genetic traits that are important for the metabolism, for the disposition, for the bioavailability of drugs. These are just three examples. And we know that there are some, especially when populations are secluded, and for instance, Ethiopia is a clear case, they develop specific ways of metabolizing drugs, such that whenever you give a drug that has been studied in another country, let's say in Western countries, and you bring it to Ethiopia or to other countries with a different way of metabolizing the drugs, you can get a different efficacy and a different toxicity. So that is important because whenever we think about bringing traditional Chinese medicine towards the West, we have always to consider the point that some kind of clinical trials have to be done on Caucasian populations. The second issue I see for traditional Chinese medicine is the cultural framework, which is very different from ours. So it's not the name of the formula, it's not the composition that creates most of the problem, but is how the efficacy is classified. If you look on the slide on the right hand side, you see that how, for instance, the efficacy of this first formula, Qin Kiao San, hope I pronounce it correctly, in Chinese traditional medicine says it disperses when heat, clears heat, and relieves toxicity, which broadly translated into a Western framework would be improvement of the function of the upper respiratory mucosal immune system. And the second one, tonifying qi to protect from external pathogens. It means as an antiviral, anti-inflammatory, and immunoregulatory drug. You see, this is clearly a difficulty that has to be somehow sorted out. Now, it is going to be sorted out. That's a very good news. I have observed what has occurred in the last 5 years in the People's Republic of China way of dealing with traditional Chinese medicine. And I must say that I am quite impressed by what I have seen. I've started seeing a lot of studies that investigate traditional Chinese medicine efficacy and toxicity through approach of genomics, looking at transcriptomics, so what this drug do on the transcription of DNA, what they do in terms of proteins, which are upregulated and downregulated, and what are the broad consequences for the metabolism of the individuals. So if you bring all this information together, you get a clear picture, and is a picture that is comparable to the picture you have on conventional Western drugs. And then what is most important is, and here I think is the most relevant and important aspect, is the network pharmacology. So trying to define which are the pathways activated by traditional Chinese medicine and compare whether these are the same activated by Western drug, or, which is the case in some instances, if they activate some additional pathway that are not activated by other Western drugs that may be useful and then can be studied further to identify new targets and new drugs. So I think that that is the most important advantage. Now, this is going and is going quite well. Now, what we still need is, as I was mentioning briefly earlier, a validation of the efficacy and also toxicity of traditional Chinese medicine versus the efficacy and toxicity of conventional Western medicine, possibly in a head-to-head comparison. And the other important point are meta-analysis. So trying to collect what the whole of the information we have on traditional Chinese medicine from a variety of studies, from not only registrative studies, but also observational studies, case reports, evidence from the clinics, and try to put them together and to make an analysis of the main outcomes. And this should lead us to understand better the drug efficiency, the drug toxicology, and as I was mentioning earlier, possibly leading to development of new drugs. And I think this is a process that has started and is going well. And China is putting a lot of effort on that, and I think is getting recognized across the world now. And we are helping this process through. We are helping through a journal from Elsevier. The publisher is a Dutch publisher. The journal is Pharmacological Research. It has an impact factor of 5.5, and this year probably it will be more than 6. And what we did was together with Elaine, Leung in Macau, what we did was to start a program on traditional Chinese medicine. And the program saw the journal organizing itself to meet this task, to bring traditional Chinese medicine towards Western mentality in a way. And we have several editors in the People's Republic of China. We have Professor Elaine Leung, Professor Wazhu, Professor Liu, who is also in this meeting, Professor Tianming Gao, plus 16 consulting editors across the People's Republic of China. And I want to mention the great support of Professor Jiangxin Chen in Beijing and his team of young guys that are helping to promote the scope of the journal in China and outside China. Now, what we did was to organize 7 special issues designed towards bringing modern traditional Chinese medicine to the fore. And this has been what is the role of traditional medicine on metabolic disorders. You know that that is a main critical issue in the Western countries. What is the role of artificial intelligence and in general advanced research in TCM to make it more, let's say, understandable? Another area which is very critical for the West is cardiovascular disorders, and what we now investigate what TCM is doing in cardiovascular diseases. But then there are also 2 critical points. One is the standardization and the policy of traditional Chinese medicine. This is not a topic here, but regulatory issues in China and the West are need to be somehow harmonized, such that what is, the regulatory process that a drug does to be marketed in the West is acceptable in China, and what the Chinese approach to marketing drugs gets accepted in the West. So that is something we are working together with Professor Zhao, essential. And with that, I think I can close my talk, thanking you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Okay. Wow, some very, very fascinating perspectives there, Professor Clementi, talking about the progress as well as the challenges in terms of the acceptance of traditional Chinese medicine by Western medicine. You also spoke about the power of combining TCM with Western medicine in combating the coronavirus, but also very interestingly, looking out for the different metabolisms around the world and how that could affect the efficacy of TCM as well. And you spoke about working with Professor Leung on research topics on TCM. Speaking of which, Professor Leung is going to be speaking to us next. Over to you, Professor Leung.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, can you see it? Can you see the
It's
screen?
loading up right now. Yep, there we go.
Okay, so good evening, everybody. First, thank you for inviting me to join the meeting. Today, I'm going to talk about a topic about considering the unique TCM holistic treatment mechanism. How can we apply it to combat COVID-19? I'm Elaine from Macau University of Science and Technology, and I'm also the associate editor of pharmacological research. So in fact, in the past 5 years, I have been collaborating with Taihe Hospital in Xiyin, Hubei. And on February, we have submitted a paper about a retrospective analysis about the epidemiological and clinical characteristic of a cohort of 73 COVID-19 patients. And similar to the reported publication, so most of the patients are ordinary and mild patients with mild syndromes, and almost half of them show fever during admissions. However, their body temperature is not that high. Most of them have a body temperature below 37.3. These are the typical CT scan of their lung. You can see the ground glass shadow on both lung and also seeing the vascular bundle enhancement in their lung. So, however, after follow-up, we found that the proportion of severe case is low and there's no death rates. So we summarized the reasons as follows. First, in mid-January, their greater attention was focused nationwide on the prevention and treatment of COVID-19. And patients in Xi'an took the initiative to go to the hospital early for early diagnosis and treatment. And also, secondly, there's no hospital overloading. There are enough medical staff and a hospital in Xi'an area, so patients can receive timely and proper treatment. Also, for drug treatments, the patient received the nebulized acetylcysteine, we call it NAC, to protect their airway. And also for those patients with strong inflammatory response, they will receive short-term use of low-dose cortisol. And in addition, TCM is widely applied at the early phase, so they can prevent disease progression and relieve the hospital staff workload. So considering the NAC, in fact, NAC is a chemical with structure similar to vitamin C. That is an antioxidant that can remove reactive oxygen species and free radical. Here you can see these are the chemical structure of the reactive oxygen species. In fact, they occur naturally in our body during oxidative and also in the inflammatory conditions. Now, there are lots of studies showing that these free radical is implicated to many human disease, including aging, cancer, and heart attack. And also, it is associated with pulmonary obstructions. And patients with pulmonary obstruction, they will have excessive sputum and thick mucus. So there are a lot of publications saying using NAC that can block pulmonary obstructions. I cannot list all of them, but these are two examples. For example, for this publication, they show that NAC can block pulmonary obstruction in a meta-analysis. There's another paper showing NAC can suppress inflammation in a cigarette smoke-induced lung cells models. So regarding the beneficial effect of NAC, so that can suggest that nowadays in the COVID-19 treatment, most people will emphasize on targeting the host protein and also the viral protein. But that is the mono-targeting strategy. That might not be enough, because if we just mono-target one protein, it is difficult to treat complex disease with multiple pathological signals, and ultimately, patient will easily to have drug resistance and recurrence problems. So that is also the strength of traditional Chinese medicine, because TCM has multi-target. Usually, most of the time, it can provide a holistic modulation treatment effect, and it works on tissue microenvironment in a holistic way, and it can modulate the redox and reactive oxygen species balance, as well as TCM can target to relieve patient's symptoms. So at the end, it can prevent disease turning into a worsened conditions. So considering the progression process of COVID-19, in fact, the whole procedure starting with the COVID-19 virus infection, and then it will cause acute lung inflammation, and then causing suppression of the immune system and release of substance. We call it cytokines and reactive oxygen species. And these substances will cause lung fibrosis, and the patient will then suffering with excessive sputum that will block their respiration and causing low oxygen level in their blood. And that is very severe, that will cause multi-organ damage and failure, which is liver. So in the past 10 years, with the guidance of President Liu Liang, we have been working on TCM components actively. So it is a summary of our work, and all those in green color showing the active component in TCMs. In fact, traditional Chinese medicine work in the cell interconnectedly. You can see it can modulate different signaling target protein inside our cells. For example, one of the Chinese herbal called sanguinarine, and the other one is called chikungunya, that can directly regulate the reactive oxygen species pathway and then induce the generation of antioxidant gene productions. At the same time, traditional Chinese medicine also modulates cell and immune cells interaction. It can enhance the interaction between the immune cells and the lung epithelial cells. Besides reactive oxygen species, actually gut microbiota is also a very important traditional Chinese medicine target, and it also aroused attention from many journalists, including it was being the cover story of a Nature Journal and The Economist. For Nature Journal, it said the microbiota is our other genome, and for The Economist, it said the microbes makes men. So you can imagine, in fact, for adults, 1 to 3 kilograms of our body weight are microorganisms. So why there are so many? Because these bacteria, these bugs are very good and important to our health. So that actually roots in our traditional Chinese medicine concept about the harmony with the environment. So in the modern science world, we can be saying that it is important to balance the good and bad bugs in our body, because some of the good bugs are responsible to produce important substance to maintain our body health. So particularly specific to talk about COVID-19 patients, sometimes they will have bacterial infection and they will receive high dose and long-time antibiotics treatments, which will likely destroy their normal flora balance. So at that time, it is important to use TCM for rehabilitations to normalize the gut flora. So in fact, taking some food substance to improve the gut microbiota condition in our guts is very common. It's happened in our daily food, like Japanese people will eat fermented beans, Korean food with kimchi, Western food with yogurt. And for our country, we will take traditional Chinese medicine. As you might know, TCM is orally administered, so it can also potentially directly working on the gut and improve gut dysbiosis. This is also our work in the past 5 years. So in fact, in some of the polysaccharide in the Chinese herbal, in fact, polysaccharide is a kind of complex sugar existing in plant. And the polysaccharide from the Chinese herbal, like coagulolus, vesicular, and aspergillus, and many other TCM active component, they can improve the gut condition and enhance the good bugs compositions. And then these good bugs will secrete a substance called short-chain fatty acid. And this short-chain fatty acid will go to the colon cell and modulate the reactive oxygen species pathway and suppress the inflammatory conditions. So because many diseases have a common pathological pathway. So in the past TCM research mechanism study, we can take into reference to apply it for today's COVID-19 treatment. So following up with Professor Clementi about our general pharmacological research, we have been collaborating and launched the first TCM special issue in 2016. And you can see we received a very good feedback. We received many manuscripts when compared with other special issues, and it is attracted and being welcomed by the TCM scientists in the community. So also with the help of Professor Clementi and also Professor Jianxin Chen from Beijing University of Chinese Medicine, we have also launched another special issue in February in 2020 about COVID-19. And we aim not to limit it to traditional Chinese medicine so that it can attract global scientists' interest. And up to now, we have received many articles from many different regions and from the 5 continents. So far, the special issue is still open. The special issues aims to provide an academic and research information sharing platform that can facilitate scientists to connect, and hopefully we can find the best way to prevent the COVID-19 pandemic. And up to this week, when I look into the journal, we can see that the most downloaded article in the last 90 days and TCM article are on the list. That can suggesting that the TCM article are arousing interest from the global scientists, and many people are downloading them and have a look on it. So besides that, our journal also have work on in China is about the WeChat account, because it is a very commonly used platform in our countries. So with the help of Professor Chen, we use our WeChat channel to promote our journal activity, like call for paper. We also have a free access of a traditional Chinese medicine paper as a fee to the readers to read it. We also launched 2 TCM awards to attract young scientists to devote to their work to the TCM research and publish their research work. So finally, I would like to thank my funding agency. And lastly, I would like to close up with this picture. I think we shall join forces together to combat COVID-19 together. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for that, Professor Leung. In giving us an overview of your research into the active components into TCM, as well as detailing for us the progress of TCM development around the world as well. Sergio, over to you now.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for the floor. And let me talk about something that is not deeply in the research, not deeply in the activities on the coronavirus, but that is anyway important in this moment. And I would like to talk about the fragile patients that are still under pressure in this moment, because they are under pressure to go in the intensive care units and in hospitals with COVID-19 units. So often our doctors of TCM in Italy are requested to prescribe something and provide something, not to go in the public hospitals for patients that are fragile and that are in quarantine at home. This is a case quite new. We started to see this patient in April 20.
Sergio, let me stop you for a second. Sergio, we can't see your presentation right now. Did you press the share screen button?
Yeah.
Oh,
let me try to stop it and start. Okay, I will stop and start again just to make sure you can see it.
Fantastic.
Let me do it again. Sorry. What about now? Can you see?
Still cannot see the presentation. Nope, it's not showing up. It's just a black screen right now, is what we're seeing.
I see. Sorry about this. Some problems, I don't know. Connection problem, probably. Is it now possible to see it? Can you see it now?
No, still not appearing. There's always bugs in modern technology, so
I will try to
perhaps
go in and out again and try again. Let's see if we can reach the point.
Well, if it doesn't work, then we might just have to go without the presentation, Sergio, and then you can just talk us through it. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
We'll give it one last try.
What I was saying is,
work.
Yes, indeed. I will try again a couple of times. If it doesn't work, I will just explain by myself without the presentation. Sorry about that with the people who are following us. What I was saying is that we can help with TCM in this moment of COVID-19, the prevention activities of the doctors, the rehabilitation of patients after the treatment in the intensive care units. And we can also help with the fragile patient. That means the patient that have other kind of disease that is not directly the COVID-19, but anyway is a disease linked or that we can reconduct closely to a SARS disease. I was introducing one case, but anyway, we have a lot of cases in this situation. We treat only with traditional Chinese medicine in Italy. In Europe, we have a ban of a lot of herbal medicine, special animals, minerals, and some plants we cannot import from China. Quite important for traditional Chinese medicine. So our doctors are doing these activities without a lot of plants and medicaments, but still the efficacy is quite high. We propose a lot of research. While I'm talking
Sergio,
to you, I'm trying again. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. Let's just avoid the PPT because you're not
This
full
screen.
screen where you're trying to pull up the PPT. Yeah, let's just stick with this. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're proposing to the health ministry to have some research on also in traditional Chinese medicine, and probably we will have some governmental level research on TCM. And what is quite important is that the efficacy of an integrated medicine between Western medicine and TCM for the prevention, rehabilitation, treatment of COVID-19, and also treatment of all the fragile people is quite important. And we notice in Italy also it's quite important for treating this kind of severe disease. We are very close to the health governmental bodies in China, and they help us a lot. There are guidelines coming out. We are into revision 8, I think now, guidelines to treat COVID-19 with traditional Chinese medicine. And we thank the Chinese Ministry of Health a lot for this. And I hope in the future we can present some new research at governmental level in Italy to your think tank program. Thank you very much, Michael.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Sergio, in terms of talking about TCM and its uses in treating the most fragile of patients. So I want to open it up to questions now. And actually, I want to go directly to our online audience after listening to all of your presentations. We have one user, Hu Dan Pan, who asks, Chinese medicine has been used in China for quite a long time now. We do believe the effectiveness of Chinese medicine on treating diseases, but the Western world always has doubts about Chinese medicine. What do you think is the biggest challenge in terms of making Chinese medicine into a world science? And I think Professor Clementi and Professor Leung, you've all spoken about this. I think this comes back to the bigger question in terms of how we can better integrate TCM with Western medicine and perhaps do away with some of the common misunderstandings. So if any of you want to jump in and talk about that, that would be great. Actually, Thomas, how about I want to get your thoughts on this, Professor Efferth. How about you jump in and take a crack at this question?
So this is certainly a question which thrives me for 3 decades now. This is really a big challenge that it seems that Western and Eastern medicine have large hurdles and cannot be combined that easy. I think the main point is that in the Western world, we have a reductionistic point of view, and in the Eastern world, there is more a holistic point of view of diseases and how to cure diseases. And I remember well when I was stepping into TCM and I was presenting data on animal research, on animal experiments, that people asked me, why are you treating animals in China? Why are you treating animals? We have experience with humans, so it's not necessary to treat animals. And this is, I think this is a good example of 2 completely different philosophies. And I think a main point to bring both worlds together is that we learn to speak the same scientific language. And I think the clinical activity of TCM, which is not to be discussed, it's quite clear that it is active. I think the clinical activity has to be translated into the terms of science which is used in the Western world. And this is, on the one side, evidence-based medicine. We need clinical evidence with Western terms that TCM is active. There is a lot of research going on that point. And the second point is that we need the molecular modes of actions of TCM. This is what has been done for Western medicine for several decades now. And we are on a good way that the same will be done for TCM. In this respect, the Chinese scientists sometimes are not speaking about traditional Chinese medicine, but on scientific Chinese medicine. I think this is a good point to make clear that we need more good molecular biology and more good science in general to make clear that TCM is really active. And then I think it would also be easy to convince more people in the Western world.
Professor Liu, you seem to agree with what Professor Efferth has said. And if you could maybe touch upon some of the differences in cultural frameworks, the differences in language that's being used between TCM and Western medicine, what is China sort of doing to promote maybe a harmonization of scientific language on this front? I mean, it could be a bit confusing, for example, for a Western audience, when TCM talks about harmony of the environment, harmony of the body, qi, for example, as well. Professor Liu.
Yes, in fact, this is a very good point, and we need to show the what's the scientific and the data for Chinese medicine treatment, as said by Professor Thomas Efferth. So back to just the point that was so-called the qi, and it's quite often and some Chinese medicine like ginseng, strengthen qi. That's how we can show what is the qi. In fact, it is very difficult to translate exactly and like the vital energy and others. But I just want to let you know, and one example, we use some cell culture, and then use a ginseng size to the cell culture. Then after several hours and like 1 hour to 4 hours about, then we can see what's the change of the activation of the mitochondria, like for example. And the mitochondria is a producer of the energy, right? So when we make a detection of the ATP production, then we found that after the treatment of the ginseng size, then the cell, the mitochondria, the ATP production very significantly increased. Then of course the ATP increased, then help the people more some the enhancement of the so-called the qi. This is a kind of example. In fact, these terminology is different. However, Chinese medicine and Western medicine, they work on the same body. This is a biological body, our human body. And I mean, so biological the evidence and the data we can show, particularly use the multiple and high-tech technology. We just have a good time, and they use analytical chemistry and the other and the biological and the molecular and biological technologies. Then they show what is the evidence, what is the scientific foundation behind. Thank you very much.
Sergio, you also had your hand up. Do you want to jump in on this as well?
Yes, Michael, if I can add something. This shareholder was asking which is the biggest challenge to make Chinese medicine into the world of science. I think the most important in this moment is about regulations. We have a lot of regulation into the People's Republic of China about Chinese medicine, but there is a lack in Europe, in USA, in all the Western countries of regulations. We need clear regulation to make it clear to the shareholder, to make it clear to the stockholders. I mean, the people that trade in Chinese medicine, the people that work in Chinese medicine, and the patients. The first step, I think, is the Western countries, they need to regulate it in a way that will be inclusive, because now they regulated in the past just as stopping what they do not know. In this moment is the time to be inclusive, to understand better, to make commission, including people that are deep expert in Chinese medicine, including academies and universities from China, and make sure that a new regulation is made in order to protect the patients and also the people that are working in this field. Thank you, Michael.
Okay. Professor Leung, could you maybe add to that in terms of what China is doing on the regulatory front for TCM? Because to my knowledge, right now for, I guess, modern TCM, there are very stringent research and clinical requirements to get these kind of products onto the market.
So thank you, Michael, for your questions. And I think, yeah, for the modernization of traditional Chinese medicine, we have been doing a lot of effort. For example, we have actively promoted in many of the publications, and we also have committee joining the International Standardization Organization. So we are trying to make things that getting the world to have a similar standards. So I think this is now going on with like academic committee and also with the government. So I'm thinking that standardization is going on.
Okay. I want to bring in another question from one of our audience members, Hao Wu. And this question is for Professor Liu. Hao Wu, acknowledging, Professor Liu, that you are absolutely a renowned expert in terms of rheumatology, whose main research direction is TCM, fighting wow, it's a hard word to pronounce, isn't it? Inflammation. There we go. Finally got it out of my system. So he says the composition of traditional Chinese medicine is very complicated, especially the TCM prescription. He asks for you if you could touch upon how we should design the research when studying the prescription of TCM in order to get an internationally recognized result.
Oh, thank you very much. This is again very excellent and the question. And for myself, I'm a clinician. I treat my patients with some autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and so on. In fact, those diseases are difficult to be treated. So according to my experiences, they're using Chinese medicine, they're herbals and hyperforming and effective significantly. However, this is my daily practice. I help the patients, but we need to show what is so-called evidence and the data and the articles to all of the world. So, firstly, we need to decide the evidence and the protocol like RCT. And RCT we can use the mixture derived from the herbal formula, but we can decide it based on the principles of RCT. We can show this is one way. On the other hand, in fact, and the RCT, now the RCT, and this is some people call it as a golden standard. However, in fact, the RCT principle we need also updated. For example, and we how to conduct the randomization under with different individuals and different and gene mutations like that. I mean, so we need also consider what is a Chinese medicine and with different prescriptions to take the effects in clinic. So just in year 2011, I with my colleagues and published an article in Nature supplement, and we propose and the personalized RCT. Personalized RCT is I think is a fit to the Chinese medicine treatment, because the Chinese medicine treatment and for the patients, not all of the patients use the same prescription, but maybe in different individuals with different prescriptions based on the pattern or the pattern or the syndrome and the differentiation. I mean, this is we need to combine the conventional medicine RCT principles together with the feature of traditional Chinese medicine. But anyway, now the research results and it's going better and better and more. I think the international collaboration is very important. I hope we can join hands together more, and with international scholars, we can join hands and make a very good design. The research results we can share each other internationally. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Professor Clementi, I mean, traditional Chinese medicine, it's very personalized, it's very customized. There's no sort of one-size-fits-all prescription for a patient, I feel. So Yes, right now, randomized controlled trials, this is one of the most effective tools for testing a new drug, but what about perhaps using other evaluation criterions when it comes to TCM?
Right. That's the main issue. And is an issue that is not only an issue for traditional Chinese medicine, but paradoxically for Western medicine also. I mean, the first point is what personalized treatment is all about. It was initially it was essentially a pharmacogenetic approach. Then we realized that pharmacogenetic approach is answering a lot of questions, but not all of them. Now, the second thing that has been brought to the fore is epigenetics. And epigenetic changes induced by drugs are persistent and can be transmitted also across generations. So clearly we need to reconsider the whole process of marketing authorization for Western and traditional Chinese medicine alike. The main, for instance, the European Medicine Agency has now determined that if you have a seizable, let's say 25% of patients not responding as the other 75%, you are bound to follow a path in which you have to understand why that has happened. And I think that is a step forward. But as Thomas was saying, the problem is that we do not need to become too reductionists, which has always been the Western approach in the last 100 years, at least. We need to find a way to consider the whole variables, not just one variable, because personalization means look at the different aspects of a single individual. And Elaine was bringing the point of the gut microbiota that is important too. I mean, we have a lot of things that go together, not just one. Now, what the TCM is doing, I mean, the scientists working on TCM are doing, and I think is very important, is this network pharmacology approach that at least gives us an idea of what are the different players that happen into an individual taking a drug, okay? And this should be the new basis for a personalized medicine and also for a new regulatory framework, I believe.
Okay, I mean, you mentioned perhaps Western medicine being a bit reductionist right now. Professor Leung, I want to maybe get back to a very basic question. If you could touch upon the different philosophies, I guess, of TCM and Western medicine. We mentioned, of course, TCM is a bit more holistic compared to Western medicine. What other major differences do we need to know? I mean, is it more of a preventative approach, preventative system, rather than treating the symptoms immediately? Walk us through some of the basics of TCM treatment philosophy compared to Western medicine.
You mean you just ask me or Dr. Liang?
Professor Leung, I mean, if you want to jump in afterwards, Professor Liu, it's okay as well, but I wanted to get Professor Leung's comments on this.
So you want me to answer it first, right? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So definitely, I think TCM works sometimes directly on the target, like the lymphocyte capsule. Now there's evidence showing that it directly target on the viral protein, the host target. So at the same time, some traditional Chinese medicine, it also works holistically, like what I mentioned about the reactive oxygen species status and also the gut microbiota status. Obviously, there are so many herbal in our traditional Chinese medicine treasures. So it still we have a lot of opportunity to take what is the treatment mechanism. So in the combination, there's a lot of different herbs and they have different treatment mechanism. Maybe Professor Liu Liang can have some.
Yeah, Professor Liu. Add on that.
Oh, thank you very much. In fact, and what is the major differences? For example, the first one is a series, so-called philosophy. In fact, this is the most important, but the most difficult, because the TCM and the conventional medicine quite different with the concepts of the treatment and the philosophy and so on, just as we discussed before. Another is what's the treatment methodology and the treatment medications. And the Chinese medicine is quite often to prescribe, as I mentioned before, use a herbal formula, but the Western drug, most of the time only with one single compound in the chemical drug. Why? And the one single compound, of course, is more easier to know what is happening in the body when taken orally the pills into the body. But the Chinese medicine must be multiple components and hundreds even. So how do we can identify what's the bioactive components? In fact, some disease is quite communicated in pathology, but not only the single factors and to induce the disease and so on. And on the other hand, the molecular targets of the pathology also quite more, not only one, but many. I think and multiple components treatment is another strategy. This is in fact is quite different from the conventional medicine, but maybe I believe this is just our advantages of the treatment. Use multiple chemicals and to treat the chemical disease. As I said, such a chemical disease only by monotherapy sometimes is quite difficult. In fact, in conventional medicine, sometimes we need to also use several drugs together, but not only one. This is a kind of philosophy and of the medicine. We are now exchanging and come together and the TCM conventional medicine. We have the common way for the study and for the treatment, for help our patients.
Okay. Well, Sergio, so in the latest revision of the International Classification of Diseases from the WHO, there's now a chapter on traditional Chinese medicine for the first time. How significant do you think that move is?
Yes, indeed. In the revision 11 of the ICD, there is a chapter on traditional Chinese medicine. This is very important for us because it makes more clear which kind of disease we can investigate on. I think this is a quite big step forward into the modernization of TCM. And we can now apply together with WHO for a lot of research according to this new chapter of the ICD-11. Let me add something, Michael, if I can, about the new rules on TCM in China. We saw in the last year that Chinese government issued a lot of guidelines on TCM. This is something that is coming out also in Europe. Italy, at least, is asking for guidelines for each disease to each society, civil society of each specialty of Western medicine. And the same we want to do for Chinese medicine. Guidelines for each disease, the safe use of the TCM, we think is very important to give more information to the patients and to have a better regulation inside the Western countries. Thank you, Michael.
Professor Efferth, would you like to add to that?
I would like to add a comment on what Professor Liu already said, and this is that there is a frequent misunderstanding in the Western world on the multispecificity of Chinese herbs. Multispecificity does not mean unspecificity. If we have one drug, one target, as it is investigated in the Western world, this does not mean that a single drug might have more than one specific target. And this is specifically what we have in TCM. We have one drug which is targeting several targets on the one side, and in the TCM recipe we have many compounds which address even more targets. And even of these targets contribute to the entire phenomenon of a symptom of a disease. So this means when we have a compound which is acting against one single target, it is easy for an organism like a virus or any other microorganism to develop resistance. One single point mutations might be enough to make a drug inactive. And this probably would not happen with TCM if we have many drugs and many targets. One single point mutation in one target would not make a recipe inactive. And this is not just an interesting point of view from the Chinese perspective. This is also supported what happened in nature for millions of years. If you look to the evolution of life, we have a lot of multi-target compounds. And the Western philosophy, one drug, one target, might be a little bit misleading in this context. Evolution has taught us that multispecificity is better, even if we have a lot of success with Western medicine. So the Western medicine has its value, there is no doubt about, but there is even more to offer from Chinese medicine if we look into the evolution of life of nature.
Professor Liu, would you like to briefly respond to that?
Yes, it's great. And in fact, now even a single compound as a drug, but not working on the single target. Just that I want to say this because Chinese medicine in the herbal components maybe and multiple the chemicals that work on more targets. Not only I'm not saying the Western drug and the single compound only work on the one target. It is not like this. And I will add another point. Sometimes the Chinese medicine can help the Western drug to reduce side effect. So I will take an example about the steroid for treatment of the lupus and the autoimmune disease. And it's quite often and for me. And I use also steroid. And however, sometimes when the dose is too much high, is high, then will some the side effects induced. So I use the Chinese medicine to help the steroid, then reduce and the dosage of the steroid. Sometimes the most of the time it is good. They help the patients. I mean, there's a multiple ways that we can integrate and TCM and the conventional medicine together for help the patients to relieve the illness of the patients.
Yeah, Professor Clementi, you had your hand up as well.
Okay, yes. Professor Liu has made a very clear and very good point in that also in the COVID, but also in most other conditions, when traditional and Western medicine applied together, you have a reduction of the side effects and possibly of the dosing. That of the corticosteroids is clearly, considering the fact that you have to take corticosteroid often throughout your life, if you can reduce dosing, is absolutely wonderful, being very severe drugs. What I wanted to make is a point on what Thomas was saying about the approach, the combined approach. Now, if you look at what has happened in the last 5 to 10 years in the Western society, the comorbidities have become more common, and as a consequence of that, polytherapy also. So our approach of one target, one drug, one target has become one combination of several drugs targeting several targets. So if you look into that perspective, maybe that a different approach, such as the one that traditional Chinese medicine has, may be helpful, especially in comorbidities. I'm not saying that it will, but at least it would be important to have a try on that. And I'm saying that also because if you look at the traditional Chinese medicine database system and you look at the comprehensive medicinal chemistry database of the West, you see that almost 10% of the compounds are present as at least as structurally similar in either database, and 3% are identical. So essentially, if we go to the bottom line, the way we developed our drugs and the way the Chinese traditional medicine has developed their approach are not that different after all. They have followed different paths, but they may be reconciled in a way. We have just to find, as Professor Leung was saying, a good regulatory framework to do that precisely and effectively.
Okay, a very fascinating discussion from our panelists today about better integrating traditional Chinese medicine with Western medicine, as well as how TCM has contributed in the efforts of combating COVID-19. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap it up there. That was part one of our special online series on traditional Chinese medicine, presented by professors Liu Liang, Elaine Leung, Emilio Clementi, Thomas Efferth, Dr. Li Guangxi, who seemed to have dropped from the line right now, and Sergio Bengrazzi. And of course, I mean, through China's millennia of history, this civilization has seen, I think, over 100 epidemics, and TCM has played a crucial part, an important role in making sure these epidemics are tamed. So there's definitely a role for TCM to play in modern medicine. And part two of this series will take place on June 6th at the same time, 8 GMT, 16 China Standard Time. In that conversation, we're going to dive deeper into some of the more controversial issues of TCM, such as safety risks, quality supervision of traditional Chinese medicine. So we do indeed hope to see you all again then. And just a reminder, CGTN Think Tank will continue to partner with other institutions around the world to bring you more online programs to help you better understand China and the world amid these trying times, amid the coronavirus pandemic. So thank you again to all of our panelists. Thank you to all of our online audiences, wherever you may be around the world. I'm Michael Wong in Beijing, and we'll see you again same time next time. Bye for now.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.